Hi everyone and welcome to a 3-part special where I'll be giving you a brief history of probably my favourite genre of theatre, musicals. Now, music in theatre has a long history and even dates back to the ancient Greeks, and probably some other cultures too. God damn you, Western hegemony! So in this first part, I'll be looking at musicals from the mid to late 19th century up until the late 1930s. In the second part, I'll be looking at the golden age of musicals from the 40s to the 60s and a few shows from the 70s. And in the final part, I'll be looking at musicals from 1981 up until now. I know that year's very specific, but it will make sense, I promise. So let's get started. Now, as I've said, music has been used in theatre for years. Musicals as we know them take their origins from the French and Viennese operettas of the 19th century. Now, these kinds of shows were popular around the world and were performing alongside melodramas and music hall variety shows. Now, music hall took on a variety format, and a lot of the songs were sung by the audience as well as the performers. Now, America had its own form of variety shows too, which later developed into vaudeville and burlesque. The first musical as we know it is often considered to be The Black Crook, which opened on Broadway in 1866. Now, there are conflicting arguments for and against the show being considered the first musical, but for the purposes of this video, we'll run with it. The show follows the villain, Count Wolfenstein, who wants to marry a girl named Amina. The only problem is, she's engaged to Rodolphe. To get him out of the picture, the Count arranges him to be wiped out with the help of Herzog. Now, Herzog has made a pact with the devil. He has to give him a soul every year. Now, during the course of the show, Rodolphe finds and saves a dove which transforms into a fairy queen, and she helps him defeat the Count, and they all live happily ever after. Now, the show wasn't universally well received, however, we can still consider it to be the forebearer of the modern musical. Now, just a few years after, Gilbert and Sullivan started to write their comic operas. I'm sure we're all familiar with HMS Pinafore and the Pirates of Penzance. That was then, all that way back in the 1800s, and their shows are still performed today. Now, the American musical managed to establish itself as a popular and standout form in theatre, and by the turn of the century, other countries wanted in on that. One of the more famous European musical revue shows was Ziegfeld's Follies. But despite the growth of European shows, the American musical dominated the musical theatre scene. During the 1910s and 1920s, we started to see more of these musical shows be produced. One of the more famous shows was the Kern Wodehouse and Hammerstein musical Showboat, which opened on Broadway in 1927. In 1929, the world was hit by the Wall Street crash, which was followed by the Great Depression. Now, like everything, theatre was hit bad during the Depression. Audiences shrank, productions decreased, and performers moved towards the screen instead of the stage. But as the old saying goes, the show must go on. And it did. Musicals of the 1930s offered a form of escapism, to allow people to escape the troubles of the Depression, even if it was just for a few hours. Musicals weren't just tied to the stage. Movie musicals were becoming increasingly popular with the development of talkies, or films with sound. Films such as The Wizard of Oz and Top Hat helped boost the popularity of musical theatre. Now, here's where we're going to stop. Next time, I'll be looking at the golden age of theatre, from Oklahoma to cabaret. If you've enjoyed this video and want to see more theatre content, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. See you soon!